In a gleaming Chicago office, CEO David Ellison sifts through employee requests. One stops him cold. "May I take home cafeteria leftovers?" It's from Sheila, a janitor, her words typed with quiet dignity. Why such a formal plea? David checks. Her file, 26, no contacts, flawless record. Curiosity grips him. He grabs his coat, steps into the night. Reggie, the night guard, slips food into Sheila's bag, unseen. What drives her? Why this request? Subscribe to catch our latest stories. And share where you're watching from. Stay till the end. Sheila's truth will change everything. Morning light sliced through the glass walls of Pinnacle Innovations, a Chicago tech empire where ambition gleamed as brightly as the polished floors. Sheila Thompson, 26, pushed her janitorial cart down the corridor, its wheels squeaking like a faint cry against the hum of corporate life. Her brown skin glistened under the fluorescent glow, her hair pulled tight in a bun, each strand a quiet defiance. She wore her Navy uniform with pride, but pride was a fragile shield here. "Janitor girl, stay out of sight," hissed a voice from a glass-walled office. Sheila's jaw tightened. It was Karen Walsh, a project manager with a smile as sharp as a paper cut. Karen leaned out, her blonde hair catching the light, and added, "We don't need your kind cluttering our view." A chuckle rippled from her team, their eyes darting to Sheila's cart, piled with mops and bleach. Sheila kept her gaze forward, her hands steady on the cart's handle. She'd heard worse. She always did. The hallway stretched like a gauntlet, every step a test. A young coder, earbuds dangling, tossed a coffee cup toward her cart and missed, splattering cream across the floor. "Oops," he smirked, not stopping. Sheila knelt, wiping the mess, her knees pressing into the cold tile. Another voice, low and venomous, drifted from a break room. "She's only here for quotas, you know. Diversity hire." The words stung, but Sheila's face stayed stone. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction of a flinch. She rounded a corner, the cart's squeak echoing in the quieter wing. A meeting room door swung open and Karen emerged, her heels clicking like gunfire. "Oh, Sheila," she drawled, loud enough for the team trailing her to hear. "Still hauling trash? Fitting job for someone like you." Her team snickered, one muttering, "Go back to where you came from." Sheila's fingers tightened around the mop handle, her knuckles paling. She wanted to snap back, to tell Karen her trash job kept this place spotless for her arrogance. But she swallowed. The words. Malik's face flashed in her mind, her brother, wheelchair-bound, counting on her. Lorraine, her aunt, was frail and fading. They needed her to keep going. She pushed on, the cart rattling. At the end of the hall, Reggie Coleman sat at the security desk, his graying hair catching the light. 50, broad-shouldered. His eyes carried the weight of years. He watched Sheila approach, his face softening. "Rough morning, kid?" he asked, voice low, like a secret shared between survivors. Sheila managed a half-smile, her shoulders sagging. Reggie slid a steaming coffee across the desk, the cup warm against her calloused fingers. "Don't let 'em break you," he said, his gaze steady. "I've walked your road. You're stronger than they know." Sheila nodded, the words sinking deep. She didn't know Reggie's story, not yet, but his eyes held a mirror to her fight. She sipped the coffee, its warmth a small rebellion against the cold around her. The day dragged, each hour piling on more slights. A manager, accidentally, knocked over a trash can as Sheila passed, smirking as she scrambled to clean it. A whispered lazy followed her down a stairwell, though she'd been scrubbing since dawn. By late afternoon, the hallway gleamed, but Sheila's chest felt hollow. She parked her cart in the janitorial closet, the air thick with bleach and exhaustion. Her phone buzzed, Malik texting about a new sketch. She smiled faintly, then caught her reflection in a bucket's shine. Tired eyes, but not broken, not yet. Shift's end brought her to the employee lounge, a sterile room with vending machines and flickering lights. Sheila sat at a corner table, her uniform stained but neat. She opened her laptop, a second-hand relic that whirred like it, was begging for rest. Her fingers hovered over the keys, hesitant. She'd heard whispers of food waste in the cafeteria, trays of sandwiches, fruit, tossed nightly. Her stomach growled, a reminder of last night's skipped meal. Malik and Lorraine needed more than scraps. She needed to ask, but pride clawed at her. Asking felt like admitting defeat. She typed, each word a battle. "May I take home cafeteria leftovers after my shift?" Her hands trembled, not from cold but from the weight of need. She reread the message, her heart pounding like footsteps in an empty hall. What would they think? Another charity case stereotype? She pictured Karen's sneer, the coder's smirk. But then she saw Malik's hopeful grin, Lorraine's frail hands. She hit send, the click echoing like a door slamming shut. Sheila stood, her legs heavy. She grabbed her worn backpack, the straps fraying like her nerves. As she passed Reggie's desk, he gave her a nod, his eyes saying what words didn't need to. She stepped into the Chicago dusk, the city's skyline glittering, indifferent. This wasn't what she expected. Not the job, not the hate, not the hunger. But Sheila kept walking, her shadow long and unbroken. The Chicago dusk swallowed Pinnacle Innovations' glass facade as Sheila Thompson stepped out, her navy uniform clinging to her sweat-dampened skin. Her backpack, frayed at the seams, hung, heavy on one shoulder. In her hand, a plastic bag rustled. Leftover sandwiches and fruit slipped to her by Reggie Coleman, the night guard, with a quiet nod. "For you," he'd whispered, his eyes carrying a weight she didn't yet understand. Sheila clutched the bag, its contents a lifeline for the night ahead. Her legs ached from 16 hours of scrubbing, but her steps were steady, driven by a promise she'd made long ago, to keep Malik and Lorraine safe no matter the cost. She crossed the empty parking lot, the city's skyline glittering like a taunt. At the CTA bus stop, a flickering streetlight cast jagged shadows. Sheila stood alone, arms crossed, the bag pressed against her chest. The cold bit through her thin jacket, but she didn't flinch. She'd faced worse than a late bus. Headlights pierced the dusk, and the bus screeched to a halt, its doors hissing. "Fin!" Sheila boarded, dropping coins into the fare box, her eyes avoiding the driver's glance. She sank into a torn vinyl seat, the bag cradled in her lap. The bus lurched forward, rattling through Chicago's veins. The ride was long, each stop, dragging Sheila deeper into the city's forgotten edges. Streetlights grew sparse, replaced by boarded-up storefronts and crumbling lots. She stared out the smudged window, her reflection a ghost against the passing decay. The bag's weight grounded her, a reminder of Reggie's kindness. He'd seen her send that email, her plea for scraps, and hadn't judged. Instead, he'd waited by the cafeteria, ensuring the manager handed her this bag. "You're not alone," his nod seemed to say. Sheila's throat tightened. Alone was all she'd felt for years, but tonight that bag felt like more than food. It felt like hope. The bus jolted to a stop near 79th Street South Side. Sheila pulled the cord, her fingers stiff. She stepped off, the air thick with exhaust, and the faint hum of distant sirens. The motel loomed ahead, its neon sign half dead, buzzing vacancy and flickering red. The building sagged, paint peeling like old skin, windows patched with tape. Sheila's key trembled in the lock, the door creaking open to a room no bigger than a closet. A single bulb dangled, casting a sickly yellow glow over stained walls and a threadbare carpet. This wasn't a home. It was survival. Malik looked up from his wheelchair, his 19-year-old face brightening. "You're back," he said, his cracked tablet balanced on his lap, a half-finished sketch glowing on the screen. Lorraine, hunched on a sagging cot, coughed softly, her gray hair wispy against her frail frame. "Took you long enough," she teased, her voice warm but weak. Sheila forced a smile, setting the bag on a wobbly table. "Got something special tonight," she said, her tone lighter than her heart. She opened the bag, the scent of day-old bread and apples filling the air. Her hands moved with care, dividing the food onto 3 chipped plates. 2 sandwiches. For Malik, a bruised peach for Lorraine, a slice of bread for herself. She pushed the fuller plates toward them, her fingers lingering on the table's edge. Malik dug in, crumbs falling as he talked about his latest design. Lorraine ate slowly, her hands unsteady. Sheila sat, her plate before her, but her fork stayed still. She cut the bread into smaller pieces, moved them around, and nodded at Malik's chatter. She smiled, her eyes soft, but her stomach growled, a secret she buried deep. Outside, David Ellison's black sedan idled across the street, its engine a low hum. He'd followed the bus, his hands tight on the wheel, unsure why. Through the motel's thin curtains, he saw Sheila's silhouette, her careful division of food. He saw her smile, saw her plate untouched. His breath caught. This wasn't what he expected. Not a janitor living like this. Not after 16-hour shifts in his gleaming empire. The bag, he realized, wasn't greed. It was a sacrifice. Sheila laughed at something Malik said, her voice masking the hunger clawing her insides. She tucked Lorraine's blanket tighter, her hands gentle. Malik wheeled to his corner, sketching again, oblivious to her empty plate. Sheila cleared the table, her movements slow, deliberate. She glanced at the bulb's weak glow, its flicker a mirror to her fading strength. This wasn't what she expected. Not the motel, not the hunger, not the weight of love. But she'd carry it as she always had. David's headlights dimmed and his car pulled away. Sheila didn't know he'd seen her, didn't know her truth was unraveling his world. She sat. On the floor, her back against the wall, the bag empty now. Her eyes closed, her breathing steady. She was still here, still fighting. Her sanctuary fragile but unbroken. David Ellison's black sedan idled in the shadow of a crumbling South Side motel, its engine a low growl against the Chicago night. The neon sign buzzed, its flickering. Vacancy casting a sickly red glow over the cracked asphalt. David's hands gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles white, his breath fogging the windshield. He'd followed Sheila Thompson's bus here, driven by a curiosity he couldn't name. Now, parked across the street, he stared at the motel's peeling facade, its taped windows like scars. This wasn't what he expected, not for a Pinnacle Innovations employee, not for someone who polished his empire's floors to a mirror shine. Through the motel's thin curtains, a weak bulb flickered, revealing Sheila's silhouette. David leaned forward, his pulse quickening. He saw her set down a plastic bag. The leftovers Reggie, the night guard, had slipped her. She moved with care, unpacking sandwiches and fruit onto chipped plates. Her brother Malik wheeled into view, his young face alight with a grin. Lorraine, her aunt, shuffled forward, her shoulders hunched, her cough a faint rasp. Sheila divided the food, her hands steady but slow as if measuring each bite's worth. 2 sandwiches for Malik, a peach for Lorraine, a single slice of bread for herself. David's eyes narrowed. Sheila sat at the wobbly table, her plate before her. She smiled as Malik chattered, his voice muffled but bright. She nodded, cut her bread into smaller pieces, and moved them with her fork. But she didn't eat. She pushed the crumbs, her lips curved in a lie, her eyes soft with love. Malik laughed, oblivious. Lorraine ate slowly, her hands trembling. Sheila's plate stayed empty. David's chest tightened, a knot he couldn't name. She wasn't eating. She was starving, so they wouldn't. The scene unfolded like a wound reopening. Sheila cleared the plates, her movements heavy, her smile fading when she thought no one saw. She helped Lorraine to a sagging cot, tucking a thin blanket around her frail frame. Malik wheeled to a corner, his tablet glowing with a sketch. Sheila knelt, spreading a tattered blanket on the floor. No bed, no mattress, just cold linoleum. She curled up, her body small against the wall, her uniform still on, stained with the day's labor. She didn't eat. She didn't rest. She just lay there, her breathing slow, her strength a fragile thread. David's hands shook, his breath shallow. This wasn't a home. It was a cage, its bars built from poverty and sacrifice. He thought of Pinnacle's cafeteria, trays of uneaten food tossed nightly, sandwiches, salads, enough to feed a family for weeks. He saw his own life, Private jets, steak dinners, an office with leather chairs worth more than this motel room. Sheila worked 16-hour shifts, scrubbed his floors, endured his employees' slurs, and came home to this. To nothing. Karen. Walsh's voice echoed in his mind, sharp and venomous. Fitting job for someone like her. He saw her smirk, heard the laughter of her team, their whispers of quotas and go back to your kind. Sheila's face flashed, her steady gaze as she mopped, her trembling hands typing that email for scraps. David's jaw clenched. He'd signed off on diversity reports, approved employee satisfaction surveys, and sat in boardrooms preaching fairness. Yet here was Sheila, invisible, starving, sleeping on a floor. His company had failed her, he had failed her. Anger surged, hot and unfamiliar. David wasn't sentimental. He was a CEO, a man of numbers, not feelings. But this wasn't a spreadsheet. This was a woman giving everything for her family, while his empire threw away what she needed to survive. He thought of the corporate retreats, the bonuses, the marketing campaigns costing millions. Then he saw Sheila's blanket, her empty plate, her curled form on the floor. The contrast burned, a truth he couldn't unsee. He leaned back, his head against the seat, his eyes fixed on the motel's dim window. The bulb flickered, casting shadows that danced like ghosts. He remembered Sheila's file. 26, no emergency. Contacts, flawless record. Flawless yet forgotten. He'd assumed his employees were cared for, that his policies were enough. But policies didn't feed families. They didn't stop slurs. They didn't give Sheila a bed. David's fingers tightened around the wheel, his rage turning inward. He'd built Pinnacle to be a beacon of innovation, but what was innovation if it left people behind? Sheila's sacrifice wasn't just her burden, it was his shame. He thought of Reggie slipping her that bag, a small act David hadn't noticed until now. How many others were like Sheila, hiding their struggles behind steady smiles? How many had he ignored? The motel's light dimmed, Sheila's silhouette fading. David's heart pounded, a vow forming in the silence. He couldn't fix this tonight. But he could start. He'd dig deeper, find the rot in his company. Karen's cruelty, the system's neglect. He'd make it right. Not for praise, not for profit, but because Sheila deserved better. Because he should have known. He started the engine, the sedan's hum cutting through the night. The motel shrank in his rear view, but Sheila's truth stayed with him, sharp and unyielding. This wasn't what he expected. Not from his company, not from himself. But it was real, and he couldn't look away. Not anymore. Dawn broke over Chicago, painting Pinnacle Innovation's glass tower in hues of fire and steel. David Ellison stormed through the lobby, his polished shoes echoing like gunshots on the marble floor. The image of Sheila Thompson, curled, on a motel floor, her plate empty, her sacrifice a silent scream, burned in his mind. He hadn't slept. The night's truth clung to him, a weight he couldn't shake. His company, his empire, had let her down. Worse, it had crushed her under. The heel of prejudice. Today, he'd ripped that truth open. He pushed through the executive suite, his office a fortress of glass and leather. The city skyline glittered beyond, indifferent to the storm brewing inside him. David jabbed the intercom, his voice sharp. "Get HR in here, now." His assistant stammered a reply, but he was already pacing. His tie loosened, his jaw tight. Sheila's file lay open on his desk. 26, no emergency contacts, flawless record, flawless, yet targeted. He saw her trembling hands typing that email for leftovers, heard Karen Walsh's venom. Fitting job for someone like her. His fists clenched. Someone like her. The phrase was a blade, and it cut deeper now. The HR manager, Evan Carter, arrived, his tie askew, his face a mask of cautious concern. "Sir, it's barely 7, he said, clutching a tablet. David didn't sit. "Pull every complaint against Sheila Thompson," he ordered, his voice low, dangerous. "Every single one." Evan hesitated, then tapped the screen, his brow furrowing as files loaded. David leaned over the desk, his shadow falling across the tablet's glow. "Read them," he said. Evan cleared his throat, his voice unsteady. Unhygienic work practices, disruptive presence, failure to follow protocol. 3 in the last month." David's eyes narrowed. "Details," Evan scrolled, his fingers fumbling. One claims she left a hallway dirty, anonymous. Another says she intimidated a team by existing near their meeting. The third questions her fit for the company culture. David's laugh was cold, cutting. "Fit? She scrubs your floors for 16 hours and asks for scraps. What's unfit about that?" Evan shifted, uneasy. "They're vague, sir. No evidence, just complaints." David's voice dropped to a growl. "Vague or targeted?" He pointed at the tablet, cross-referenced the dates. Who was on shift? Evan's fingers flew, pulling schedules. A name surfaced, Karen Walsh. She'd been present for every complaint, her team's names peppered in the logs. David's pulse quickened. Karen's sneer flashed, her "go back to your kind," her laughter at Sheila's cart. "Dig deeper," he said. Evan nodded, sweat beading on his forehead. He pulled email chains, finding coded phrases. Diversity issues, not our type. One message, from Karen to a colleague, read, "She doesn't belong here. Handle." To read, David's blood ran hot. Handle it. They'd tried to erase Sheila, to bury her under lies and slurs. He dismissed Evan with a curt nod, his mind racing. This wasn't just one woman's cruelty. It was a pattern. A rot festering in Pinnacle's polished halls. He'd seen the numbers, diversity quotas met, employee surveys glowing. But numbers lied. Sheila's reality didn't. He crossed the office, stopping at the window. The city sprawled below, its pulse a reminder of his power. Power he'd misused by looking away. His gaze fell on the security desk below, where Reggie Coleman sat, his broad frame hunched over a logbook. Reggie, who'd slipped Sheila that bag of food, who'd nodded to her like a lifeline. David's. Guyot told him Reggie knew more. He took the elevator down, the descent a mirror to his unraveling certainty. The lobby was quiet, the morning shift just stirring. Reggie looked up as David approached, his eyes wary but steady, etched with years of unspoken battles. "Reggie," David said, his voice softer now, "we need to talk." Reggie set down his pen, his shoulders squaring. "About Sheila?" he asked, his tone guarded. David nodded, leaning against the desk. "You saw her struggle. Why didn't you say anything?" Reggie's jaw tightened, his gaze drifting to the floor. "Said plenty in my day, sir. Didn't change much." He paused, his voice dropping. "I was her, 30 years ago. Janitor. Black. Slurs every day. Boy, trash. Kept my head down to feed my wife. She's gone now, but Sheila, she's living my fight." David's breath caught. Reggie's words were a mirror, reflecting Sheila's trembling hands. Her forced smile. "They're targeting her," David said, his voice hard. "Complaints, lies, Karen's behind it." Reggie's eyes flashed, a spark of old anger. Karen's kindness always is. They see us, think less. Sheila's stronger than I was. But she's breaking. You saw her, didn't you? David froze. He hadn't told anyone he'd followed her, but Reggie's gaze cut through him. He nodded, the motel's dim light flickering in his mind. "She deserves better," David said. His voice raw. Reggie leaned forward, his hands clasped. "We all did. You run this place. What you gonna do?" The question hung, heavy as the city's hum. David's anger surged, not at Reggie, but at himself. He'd built Pinnacle, preached fairness, yet let prejudice thrive under his nose. Sheila's sacrifice, her empty plate, her floor-bound sleep, was his failure. Karen's cruelty was his blind spot. He straightened, his eyes burning. "I'm starting with her," he said. "Sheila, then the whole damn system." Reggie's nod was slow, a flicker of respect in his eyes. "Good. But it's deep, sir. Deeper than one woman." David's jaw clenched. He knew. The complaints. The slurs, the wasted food. They were symptoms of a sickness he'd ignored. He turned, his steps heavy, his mind clear. He'd find the truth, every ugly piece, and tear it apart. The elevator doors closed, sealing David in with his resolve. He saw Sheila's silhouette, her blanket on the floor. This wasn't what he expected. Not from Pinnacle, not from himself. But the truth was out, and he wouldn't look away. Not again. The morning sun poured through Pinnacle Innovations. Glass walls bathing the Chicago Tower in a glow that felt, for the first time, like promise. David Ellison stood at the head of the boardroom, his suit crisp but his eyes fierce, a man remade by a truth he couldn't unsee. Sheila Thompson's sacrifice, her empty plate, her blanket on a motel floor, had shattered his illusions. Today, he'd shatter the system that let her suffer. The executives before him shifted, their faces a mix of unease and curiosity. David's voice cut through the silence, steady as steel. We've failed our people. Starting now, that ends. He laid out the changes with precision, each word a hammer striking the old ways. Leftover cafeteria food, sandwiches, salads, fruit, would be packaged daily, offered free to employees in need. No questions, no shame. Wages for full-time staff, especially janitors, would rise, enough to cover rent, food, and dignity. Anti-racism training, mandatory, would root out the poison of prejudice. David's gaze swept the room, lingering on a vacant chair. Karen Walsh's, her sneers, her go back to your kind, her coded complaints against Sheila had earned her a suspension, effective immediately. Whispers rippled, but David's stare silenced them. This wasn't a suggestion. It was a reckoning. Downstairs, Sheila pushed her janitorial cart through the familiar gauntlet of halls, its wheels quieter now, as if sensing the shift. The air felt different, lighter, though her navy uniform still bore the stains of yesterday's labor. Her brown skin glistened under the fluorescence, her bun tight, her eyes cautious but unbroken. The usual taunts. Janitor girl. Not. Our type were absent, replaced by hurried glances and hushed voices. She didn't know why, didn't trust it. She'd learned to brace for cruelty, not change. At the shift's end, her manager, a wiry man named Tom, called her to his office, a cramped room smelling of coffee and paper. Sheila stood, her hands clasped, expecting a reprimand. Instead, Tom slid an envelope across the desk, his face softer than she'd ever seen. "Open it," he said. Sheila's fingers trembled, the paper crinkling as she tore it. Inside, a raise, significant enough to move her family from the motel to an apartment, enough to buy groceries without guilt, enough to breathe. Her eyes widened, her breath catching. This is real?" she asked, her voice a whisper. Tom nodded. "You've earned it, Sheila, more than you know." She left the office, the envelope clutched to her chest, her steps unsteady. The hallway blurred, not from tears but from weightlifting, a possibility she'd never dared imagine. She passed the security desk, where Reggie Coleman sat, his graying hair catching the light. His eyes met hers, a question in their depths. Sheila paused, her voice soft. "They gave me a raise, Reggie. Enough to move." Reggie's face broke into a smile, rare and warm, his broad shoulders relaxing. "Told you, kid," he said, his voice thick. "You're stronger than they know, proud of you." Sheila's throat tightened. She saw his nod from nights past, felt the warmth of his coffee, his quiet, "Don't let him break you." She hadn't been alone. "Thank you," she whispered, her eyes bright. Reggie's nod was enough, a bond forged in shared battles. Back at the motel, the evening light filtered through cracked blinds, softer now, as if the room knew its days were numbered. Sheila set her backpack down, the envelope still in hand. Malik wheeled over, his tablet glowing with a new sketch, his grin wide. "Got news," he said, holding up the screen. An email. He'd won a graphic design contest hosted by Pinnacle's marketing team, his talent spotted despite his lack. of credentials, a cash prize small but real enough to fuel his dreams. Sheila laughed, the sound raw, unburdened. "You did it, Malik," she said, her hand on his shoulder, her pride louder than her hunger. Lorraine sat on her cot, her frail hands busy with a needle and thread. She'd found a scrap of fabric, blue, vibrant, in Sheila's bag, a cast-off from Pinnacle's decor. Her fingers, unsteady but sure, had woven it into a scarf, its edges neat, its color a defiance of the motel's gray. "For you," Lorraine said, her voice warm, her eyes misty. Sheila took the scarf, its softness a contrast to her calloused hands. She draped it over her shoulders, the blue catching the bulb's weak glow. "It's beautiful," she said, her voice cracking. Lorraine smiled, her cough quieter today, as if hope had steadied her breath. Sheila stepped outside, the scarf a shield against the Chicago chill. She walked to the bus stop, her posture straighter, her eyes no longer downcast. The skyline glittered, not a taunt now, but a horizon. She thought of Karen's suspension, the whispers of change and Reggie's pride. The gauntlet of scorn was crumbling, not gone, but weaker. Sheila stood taller. She'd carried her family through hunger, through hate, and now she'd carry them to something better. Upstairs, David watched from his office, the city sprawling below. He saw Sheila's cart, her scarf, her steady steps. He'd started with her, but this was only the beginning. The system was bending, not broken yet, but bending. This was right, this was what leadership meant. Spring sunlight spilled across Chicago, softening the sharp edges of Pinnacle Innovation's glass tower. Months had passed since David Ellison stood in that boardroom, his words reshaping the company's soul. Now the halls buzzed with a new rhythm, not perfect, but alive with possibility. Cafeteria leftovers no longer filled dumpsters. They were boxed and claimed by workers without shame. Wages had risen, easing the weight on tired shoulders. Anti-racism workshops once scoffed at were now packed. Employees like Karen Walsh either learning or leaving. The air felt lighter, as if the building itself exhaled years of neglect. David walked these halls, his suit less stiff, his eyes sharper. He'd started with Sheila Thompson, but the change was spreading, a ripple he hadn't foreseen. Across the city, in a modest South Side apartment, Sheila Thompson stood at a window, the skyline no longer a taunt, but a view she'd earned. The apartment was small, 2 bedrooms, a creaky radiator, a kitchen table scarred but sturdy. No peeling paint, no flickering bulbs, just warmth. Sheila's navy uniform hung in a closet, replaced today by a sweater and Lorraine's blue scarf, its vibrant threads a quiet triumph. She moved with ease, her steps unburdened by the motel's ghosts. Malik's laughter echoed from the living room, his wheelchair gliding over new floors, his tablet glowing with designs for a freelance gig. Lorraine hummed in the kitchen, her cough softer, her hands steady as she stirred a pot of soup. This wasn't luxury, it was home. Sheila's raise had made it possible, each paycheck a brick in this new foundation. Malik's contest win had added a spark, his art now a small income stream. Lorraine's scarf draped over Sheila's shoulders was a reminder of love that had carried them through hunger. Sheila touched the fabric, her fingers tracing its seams. She saw Reggie's nod, felt his coffee's warmth, and heard David's promise. The gauntlet of scorn hadn't vanished. Whispers lingered, old biases died hard, but it was weaker now, its sting dulled by her strength. A knock at the door broke her thoughts. Sheila opened it, surprised to find David Ellison, his tie loose, his face unguarded. "May I come in?" he asked, his voice softer than a CEO should be. Sheila nodded, stepping aside. Malik wheeled forward, curious, while Lorraine peeked. From the kitchen, her eyes wary but kind. David took in the room, the table, the sketches pinned to the wall, the scarf. "You've built something real here," he said, his gaze settling on Sheila. "I didn't do this, you did." Sheila's throat tightened. "You gave us a chance," she said, her voice steady. "That's more than most." David shook. His head, his eyes distant, seeing her on that motel floor, her plate empty. You showed me what strength is, he said. I was blind too long. Malik grinned, holding up a sketch, a cityscape, vibrant, alive. She's always been the strong one, he said, his pride bright. Lorraine shuffled over, offering David a bowl of soup. Sit, she said, her tone firm, a grandmother's. Command, David smiled, accepting, the act bridging worlds once miles apart. Outside Pinnacle, Reggie Coleman stood at the security desk, his logbook open, his presence a quiet anchor. He'd taken on training new guards, his voice steady as he taught more than protocols, empathy, vigilance, humanity. See the people, not just the job, he told a young recruit, his eyes drifting to Sheila's cart, now pushed by another. He'd seen her that morning, her scarf catching the light, her steps sure. Thank you, she'd said again, her smile real, no longer forced. Reggie's chest swelled, a pride he hadn't felt since his wife's days. He'd walked Sheila's road, slurs, struggle, and survival, and now saw her rise. Keep going, kid, he'd whispered, his nod a vow kept. The training room buzzed, guards nodding as Reggie spoke, his words planting seeds. He thought of his wife, gone too soon, and Sheila, living proof that change was possible. His role was small, but it mattered. He'd helped hold the line, and now he'd help others do the same. Back at Pinnacle, David walked the cafeteria, watching employees claim food boxes, their faces free of shame. The halls were quieter without Karen's venom, though some resisted. Clinging to old ways, they'd learn or leave. David's line was drawn. He passed a meeting room where a diversity trainer's voice carried, firm but hopeful. The company wasn't perfect, but it was moving, each step a tribute to Sheila's fight. Sheila stood at her apartment window, the city's pulse steady below. Malik sketched, Lorraine hummed, and the scarf warmed her shoulders. She thought of Reggie's pride, David's visit, and the rays that changed everything. The skyline shimmered, a horizon she could reach. This wasn't what she expected. Not the fight, not the victory, not the home. But it was hers, built from sacrifice, now blooming with hope. David returned to his office, the view vast but humbling. He saw Sheila's strength in every policy, every box of food, every trained guard. Leadership wasn't power, it was responsibility. He'd learned that from her. The ripple was growing, and he'd keep it alive. As Sheila's scarf catches, the Chicago light, her story lingers, a testament to strength, sacrifice, and change. What did her journey stir in you? Share your thoughts below. How has Sheila's fight or Reggie's quiet support moved you? Your voice matters. We're grateful you joined us, feeling the pulse of this truth. Subscribe and stay with us for more stories that challenge, inspire, and unite. Until next time, keep seeing the unseen, and let's meet again soon.